Welcome back to Thinking Critical, everyone. And this is Wes, and it's time for the Comics Aficionados. And we've got an interesting topic here to talk about this week, and a couple of new members of the panel. Obviously, we have had Kneon from Clownfish TV, who is with us. How are you doing, buddy?
Good. Thanks for having us on.
But today we got the main event. We got Geeky Sparkles in the house as well. Thank goodness.
Hello.
Also joining the channel for the first time, we have Chris Braley from Bleeding Fool, who obviously broke the story or the expose on the Whisper Network recently. How you doing?
Good, thanks, Wes.
Well, I'm glad you can make it. And then we have a couple of stalwarts with the channel, obviously. Perch, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
And then obviously we also have Doc, my co-host, my partner in crime, the man who's been with the stream since day one.
Word. Morning, everybody. How we all doing?
So, Chris, I know I saw there were indications that you were actually having a bit of trouble after you posted the article or the expose with some information. It sounds like that was the first wave of information that you have more things coming. Mm-hmm. There was some type of denial of service or denial of service attack on your website.
To be honest with you, I do not know what happened. I was on the phone with the web tech for about an hour and a half, and he had never seen anything like it. He couldn't explain why it was doing what it was doing. The traffic was, we did have an increase in traffic, but it wasn't like our highest peak of traffic ever. And I don't know. We got it worked out. We moved some things around. I was frantically trying to unplug plugins, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with having your own website like that, but it was a mess. It was a mess. But we got it back on, and that article that you mentioned has given us a lot of traffic. Sort of stepped it up yesterday. I don't think we published anything new yesterday whatsoever.
Well, why would you if you have all the that many people coming for it? But that was a lot of information. Obviously, we've sort of known about this Whisper Network for a while. It's not like the members are exactly protective of their status and some of the things that they do. But I think we still are unclear of all the details exactly how it works. I know, Perch, you and I had talked about this already, and Whisper networks kind of go back a long ways in comics, where you have groups kind of behind the scenes. We called it the Illuminati. It's not exactly a new phenomenon, correct?
No. I mean, this kind of thing, if you're talking about just people joining together to have influence over an industry or just to try and control their own power or whatever it happens to be, you can trace this back to the 70s, honestly, in how it's worked with comics. I think the unique, and in most industries, but the unique thing around comics is that it often gets more power than in more businesses. It's kowtowed to more in comics for really no apparent reason. But it's complicated. But yeah, this isn't a new phenomenon, and it is unfortunately part of comics.
Well, I was going to say, I listened to your conversation, Perch and Wes's conversation. I guess it was yesterday, and I don't disagree with any of it. This isn't new. We've been talking on our website. I know you guys have been talking on your channels and just pointing out some of the, I know Sparkles and Kneon have been. We're just pointing out this bad behavior. I think what's interesting about this article, and it does take a while to get to it, is there is some call to arms later on in the article. What I think is well done about what Penny has done here is she sort of sets the table as you go in and talks about, first of all, what it is, what's going on, how she got involved in it. Then she kind of peels back the curtain a little bit and shows us some things that are being said and who is involved in saying these things, or at least are participating. Because obviously, we're not going to sit and do an expose on all 443 members of this secret Facebook group. And not all of them are doing anything gross. You've really only got a handful of players, and some of them very tertiary in the comic book industry. I mean, not like Gail Simone. Obviously, I'm not talking about her, but a couple of the people that are the most vocal and most active You'd be surprised the last time they did a comic book or had anything to do with comic books. But I think a couple of things are eye-opening about this article. Number one, that women in comics are not a marginalized people. There's over almost 500 just in this one group. And I also think it's interesting that this is not a private Facebook group in that I don't have to go ask permission for it. This is a secret Facebook group, meaning that you actually won't even be able to find it unless you are specifically invited. And then one more step has to happen. You have to be approved by someone who's very high up in the ranks that we'll all recognize if I shared her name. But I don't want to there's more to come to this. We're just kind of doing a slow roll on this. And Perch made a good point. This isn't new. I mean, if you go back, if you look at an article I did on Bleeding Fool a couple of years ago called, I think it's the PC culture that's infecting comics culture. And back then, Max Bemis is mentioned in this article. Max Bemis was acting just as gross 2 years ago on his social media. I mean, this all sort of preceded DC Comics coming out with their own social media policy. If you recall, it was rather short-lived, but DC came out with one. We were wondering if Marvel ever would. And then when Alterna Comics came out with theirs, some of these same players threw a fit about it. And yet later on, you'll see in this article where somebody's saying, hey, I think there needs to be an HR person that comics people can go to. So in case anybody's being harassing creators or fans. I mean, so it's not all brand new, but it's interesting that we're starting to peek and see what's going on behind the scenes when people think no one else is ever going to see what they're saying.
I agree. Now, Kneon, you've been in the comic book industry as a creator for quite a while, and I imagine networks are behind the scenes all the time, and I think they're probably really healthy. I think there's probably a network of Black creators that they keep in contact with each other. If they see job openings or stories that will fit a member of the group, they let them know. Probably a network of like Latino creators, probably a network of Christian creators, maybe even a network of more cartoony style artists and things like that, so they can keep in touch behind the scenes and kind of support each other. And that feels healthy. But I think where we get with this particular Whisper network that is unhealthy is where they're it feels like they're getting together and they're trying to attack people and trying to drive them out of the industry. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, I would say, because look, the way comics works now, it used to be back in the day that it was mostly you take your portfolio to editors at conventions or schedule a trip to Marvel Comics or DC Comics, and I've done all that. But I mean, anymore, to break into comics, really any industry, it does come down to networking. You have to know people who get you in, and that is good when it's not abused. But the kind of whisper networks that we see now is, like you said, kind of the I guess the gross perversion of what used to be a pretty normal, healthy thing. It's not new. I agree with Perch. It's been around forever. And when you deal with an industry like comics that's so small, and I think it also comes down to it being small and the lack of resources. I think there are people in the industry that want to control what kind of people come into comics because it is so small. You want to make sure that you like the people that are coming in. And then it went from that to, are these good people, to, okay, are these people aligning with my own personal ideologies? Are they going to play ball with the way that we've kind of set up the comic book industry? And, it's not shocking at all. I mean, Geeky has had run-ins with some of the people on this board. She doesn't play ball with the other ladies in comics, so she's kind of targeted.
It's not even just comics. We're seeing it in media too, like and just the way things are being reported and things like that. We see it with TV shows and animation. It's just not comics anymore. But I want to go back to the thing you said about the guidelines for social media. That's not new either. When we worked and did stuff for Disney, we had guidelines we had to follow. Yeah. When we had signed contracts, we weren't allowed to. You weren't allowed to say certain things on social media. It wasn't a new thing. It wasn't like just to control people. It's just if you're representing a company, they don't want you out there saying things that are going to chase customers away, which is exactly what happened. And that's not a new thing. I just wanted to say that because. Go ahead.
No, that's okay, because I'm just looking at this, and from my perspective, it just looks even the social media policy and people having such a fit about it just shows how unprofessional the comic book industry is, because any other industry, this is normal.
And there's not enough money in it to make it worth the hassle. That's what I don't understand.
I don't get it either.
It cuts both ways. I mean, I think there's not enough money, so there is this kind of almost inherent belief that therefore we should be allowed to do more things. We should allow it to be less restricted because we're taking less money, so we should be more free. And it doesn't work that way. And you're right on the social media policy. I mean, I've seen the Disney policy. I've seen the AT&T Time Warner policy. And I know that the AT&T Time Warner policy was shared about a week ago, again, as a reminder to employees after a couple things have happened. So it still is out there. The challenge is nobody wants to enforce it, both because it's they believe it's just too difficult to make this stick with contractors. And they don't feel it's worth the hassle. Like nobody wants to go chase this thing down. So a lot of companies, in more than just comics, are starting to fall into this where they don't really enforce it. They don't really look, and they just kind of assume that, if things get really loud and something trends or there's a lawsuit, then they'll pull it out and they'll use it to defend themselves. But they're not being proactive about it anymore. And that's not a good thing.
Well, I think it's just the industry itself. I mean, they've been doing this for so long, and nobody's ever come and told them you're not allowed. It's just that simple. If you have there's a couple of people here that are parents, you got kids that nobody tells them they're not allowed to do something. When suddenly you tell them you're not allowed to do something, they go, "What do you mean I'm not allowed? I've been allowed to do this forever."
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah. You have to establish boundaries.
I think that's a good point. I think that also is why some of these creators react the way they do. I mean, I have an ongoing love-hate relationship with John Layman to the point that, and he uses the most vile language when he communicates with us. I say us because, there's more than one bleeding fool contributor out there. But one of the things that sort of stunned me, and it took me a moment, because when I first got this material, this person approached me with it, and actually approached a couple of outlets with it, and I talked with some of the other people and looked over what was there, and there wasn't really a lot. This person, I don't want to reveal anything, but I do want to say that if you read some of these tweets, like for instance, I'll just jump right in. Alex DeCampi, some of the things that are said, if I had secret Facebook screenshots of Max Bemis saying, "Oh, I heard that Mags Visaggio's got a Simon & Schuster deal. Let me see what I can do to stop that. Let me see what I can do and go behind the scenes with this other, with Bleeding Cool, who I used to write for, and see if I can get them to adjust that narrative a little bit. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain." Women in comics, they're real, they're here. And at first I thought it was because, well, there's hardships and they're having to push back. And then I thought, well, it's because they're marginalized and they need to lift their voices. And then I thought, well, it's these that used to identify as one gender and now they identify as another gender, so they're marginalized, so we need to give them something more than just token books to show that they exist. And then as the more that I thought about it, meditated on it, prayed about it, read about it, looked into it, it just seems like this is all about money. This is about, I need to get rid of this person so that I will fill that hole. I mean, near the end of the article, you see they're even going after Scott Snyder, not privately, publicly, calling Scott Snyder, of all people, out that he's not doing enough for women in comics. And this is the Batman writer, right? You're not doing enough for women in comics unless you take who I think is a marginalized, whatever that means, creator, and no, don't give them the Mr. Mxyzptlk one shot. They need to be writing or drawing Superman or Batman. I mean, I'm putting words, I'm filling in the blanks, but if you look at it, he does that silly pledge that everyone did, the big empty pledge, and gets harangued on social media. And that's the other thing that bugs me. On the one hand, you've got this secret group where you can say all these things and coordinate whatever you're going to do, and then publicly you're acting very gross. Why not just reach out to Scott Snyder privately? I mean, why do you have to not only you didn't reply to the tweet, you retweeted it with your own commentary as though you're saying, I'm going to send my flying monkeys after this heretic because they weren't obedient to me. They didn't acquiesce to my philosophies. It's gross. At the end of the day, the more I think about what has been shown here, the grosser it gets because it's petty. It's petty. It's mean girls. Since the articles come out, I've had other female creators that I know, I don't know personally, but have reached out to me telling me about their own experiences. Like they were invited, but the moderator, whose name I won't mention at this time, never approved it, or things like that. So, you know, yeah, there's whisper networks. I mean, let's face it, guys. I'm politically, I'm libertarian who leans right, and I'm a member of a comics related private group of those sorts of people, right? And there's probably been a comment or two in there that would embarrass one or two people in that group. So I get that, you know, we've revealed something here that they didn't want revealed. But at the end of the day, what I'm hoping will happen is that people will stop acting gross like this, and that they will be ashamed of themselves and say, oh, you know, because we're not attacking anybody. We're just basically holding up a mirror and saying, is this cool what you did? Because I don't think it's cool. Maybe you could explain to me how this is cool, because from here it doesn't look cool at all. Matter of fact, it looks very uncool. Maybe you could stop being uncool and we could get back to making good comics instead of and hiring and firing based on the merit of the story, as opposed to whatever you think you need to play God to make some sort of outcome that isn't happening naturally.
So I did want to say thank you very much to Ryan Wilson for the $4.99 super chat. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. I think it's not one small group in charge, but a lot of powerful people in groups and many others that control the media. Perch, do you think that's what's actually going on here in comics, or do you think that's a more of an idea of what's going on in entertainment?
It goes on everywhere. I mean, again, and this is where this is an interesting topic to talk about, because like we talked at the beginning, this isn't a new thing. Sometimes when we say that, people push back and go, well, okay, you're saying it's okay. No, it's not okay. It's not new. Then it not being new doesn't mean this is all okay. But this does exist, as was said earlier as well, in other forms of entertainment. It exists in games. It exists in entertainment. There are LinkedIn groups, and there are networks where this kind of stuff happens in almost every industry. And whenever you get a handful of people that are trying to look out for their own interests, and like you said, sometimes this is fine. And there are lots of cases where people are trying to look out for each other. Maybe they're trying to find opportunities for other women where, you know, the industry isn't hiring other women, or maybe it's a support group for people who are kind of new to the business and they're trying to figure out kind of their footing in it. There's lots of good reasons for private groups. What should happen, and what normally happens in a lot of industries, is when they get into this kind of I'm going to go and I'm going to use some back channel to kill a publishing deal, or I'm going to use my relationship to make sure that a writer doesn't work with an artist I don't like, or those kinds of things, that there's some level of either HR or management or just common sense that says, hey, that's not good behavior. We can't do that. That's going to get us sued at some point. That's not a good plan. But comics doesn't have that, and they haven't had that in a long time. And it's a shame it exists here. It's the other part of this that's kind of interesting, though. I just have to say, and I mean no offense by any of this, is that when this article came out, people were like, oh my God, can you believe that these people were involved in this situation? And I'm like, well, yeah, of course I can believe it. We've seen many of these people make these comments tons of times. So the article wasn't surprising in that sense. It was what we largely already knew about these people, and I think maybe the new thing for a lot of folks was just seeing it all in one place, and they gathered up saying, oh, okay, here's kind of the whole puzzle piece all put together. It's an interesting dynamic. Unfortunately, like people said, it's going to be very hard to solve. This does not have an easy solution.
Yeah, I think we're just really shedding light on old ground. It's sort of like we're circling back around, and most of the time we're all talking about what's Star Wars or Disney doing again, and it's not as though we are out there. I mean, we're fighting for truth, justice, and the right way to do things, and we've got these little pockets of people that you're right, Perch. They're behaving like this. They've behaved like this before. We've seen many of these same players out there doing the back and forth and doing the cancel culture routine and making demands and doing the clapbacks and all that kind of stuff socially, out there in the public. There's really only a handful of snapshots in this article that are from inside this secret group that you would have to have access to see, because that's what I think is so interesting about what Penny's done is she's sort of set the table. Here's these people, and let's be honest, sometimes it saddens me to see what creators whose work I admire, who seem to be suffering from some sort of TDS, or they really have a really strong opinions that they're not afraid to beat people over the head with, such as guys like Kurt Busiek or Dan Slott or other very fine creators who otherwise have the most appalling social media habits. I love John Byrne. I'm sure I could never hang out with him, but that's fine. But what it's okay to have, maybe not aggressive behavior is fine, but just being a salty curmudgeon is one thing. But you're right. We're pointing out that these people are targeting other people or making demands. We don't hear demands for equality of gender in the ditch digging industry or the bricklaying industry or the nanny industry. For whatever reason in this creative industry, and it should be equal. I mean, I'm not saying that there should be, that I have some ratio already figured out, but it shouldn't be 50-50 either. I mean, originally comics started out as a industry that appealed to young boys, especially the superhero industry. And for anybody to be feeling as though there aren't enough women in comics when I had no idea there was a secret Facebook group of 400 and something women in the comics industry. So to me, this is a win for women. We've revealed, hey, look, there's more women in comics than you thought. Isn't that wonderful? Oh shoot, look at the few in there that are acting like cockroaches. Maybe they'll clean out their own little private group. We know that won't happen. That's the other thing that I find unsettling is that there are some names in this group that I have a lot of respect for, women that I admire. I admire their work, and I've admired how they've acted publicly. And I'm sort of torn as to whether or not we want to show the difference between the public and the private, because I don't want certain people to show the difference between me publicly and privately, right? So we're kind of trying to navigate that a little bit, because the point is really we want this kind of behavior to stop. We're not trying to get anybody in any trouble. And we've already got plenty of white knights that came out immediately when the article dropped and said, oh, this is nothing, or oh, this isn't what you think it is, or oh, these are fake screenshots, or is that all you got, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, if you don't like the article, you don't have to read it. I mean, it's as simple as that. If you don't like this YouTube channel, you don't have to watch it. But if you go back, particularly even the Kingdom Insider, I mean, you guys were talking about some of this kind of behavior in comics 3 years ago. I mean, you're right, this is not new, but it just seems here, let's go back around again and, oh crap, the industry's still infested with these termites. What are we going to do about it? And we can grouse about it or complain and argue about it. But really what I hope is going to happen is they'll just kind of take a look at themselves, or maybe have some of their coworkers or peers say, hey, that's, maybe you shouldn't do that. That's not very cool. I joked with our writer that there were a lot of Facebook posts getting deleted over the weekend. We'll see. I think Wes is muted, or am I?
Wes is muted.
He's miming. He's miming.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the very good points, Ron. Thank you so much for the $5 super chat from Everett Todd. And I want to send this one over to Kneon because I know you've worked with Kneon and Geeky because you worked for Disney before. It'll end when Disney and Warner directly replace the entire C-suite with their brass, not comic book people. How close do you think we are to where if Disney and Warner Brothers, if they want to invest heavily in comics, they finally realize that maybe it's best not to have comic book people doing the management part?
I think we're getting pretty close. I mean, we're seeing what's going on with Warner Brothers right now. They're trimming all the fat. And, everything we've been hearing, Chris was talking about the Kingdom Insider, and that's kind of what got us into this anyway, was, I worked in Disney Comics for years, and then I just dipped into Marvel. I'm like, man, Marvel's not doing so hot now. What is going on? Because they're not run like a Disney company. And then, started hearing some stuff rumblings behind the scenes that there's going to be a management change, that Disney was looking to outsource all their publishing, because every other Disney IP, they just, they foisted off onto third parties, licensees. Marvel's the only one that they actually publish themselves. But just talking about that out loud got me blacklisted.
Right.
I had people I worked with for years.
People we knew personally.
People we knew personally that knew me personally. I've never had a problem with. All of a sudden, because we had no idea this whole debacle was going on. We had no idea about Comicsgate or any of this stuff. I got blacklisted by people I worked with for years. I got concerned people coming to me behind the scenes being like, you ought not talk about those numbers at Marvel. I'm like, what? They're numbers. That's literally it. And it's like, I work in and around Disney. This is what we talk about. I don't understand how Marvel's allowed to operate the way that it's operating, because it doesn't make sense. When you look at all the other Disney-owned companies and how they operate, Marvel's just like a free agent. Like, they're just out there doing whatever the hell they want to do. And I don't understand, knowing Disney, why they're not stepping in and doing something. Again, had no idea any of this stuff was going on. And that's kind of what got us into it. And,
recognizing something was wrong was enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
To put you on the naughty list.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we used to be, guests at conventions. I worked on, worked on Disney Comics for like 15 years prior to, writing about Disney, the company, and the theme parks. And
you're pretty big in webcomic circles too.
Yeah.
A lot of those people tend to lean very extremist anymore.
Yeah.
So.
And people even know our personal politics. They know that, we're moderates. We do lean left. And that had nothing to do with it. Just pointing out that the emperor had no clothes and asking questions was enough to get us basically blacklisted, from the industry. Like, I don't even look for comics work now because I know I'm not going to get it.
Well,
especially after YouTube.
It doesn't pay anyway.
Oh, it doesn't pay anyway.
But as far as Disney goes too, I don't know if they're going to bother. I think they'll get rid of things before they actually, send people in. Like, I don't think they'll just foist it off onto third-party vendors entirely.
Yeah, they were testing IDW, because right about 6 or 8 months before IDW started doing the superhero comics, I had people from the Disney publishing side being like, yeah, they're talking about just outsourcing everything. Right. And I think because IDW dropped the ball and IDW was having its own financial problems, if that had worked out better, I mean, again, personal opinion, if that had worked out better, I think Disney would have just said, here you go, IDW, you take over the superheroes for us.
They just care about the MCU. They don't really care too much about
they don't
comics.
Care. I mean, if I could tell you how little comic books mean to the Walt Disney Company, I keep joking with people. It's like t-shirts. T-shirts mean more to them than comic books. And it's true.
It makes more money.
Yeah, it makes more money.
They want what makes money. They'll cancel really profitable parts of their business and sell it off.
Yep.
And gaming and things like that. If it doesn't make enough money, and especially now since they're hurting for money, they're banking on movies, on the parks reopening, and streaming. So you're seeing all the Marvel stuff go to movies and streaming because that's what they care about.
And that's the same with Warner. They're putting everything in the HBO Max. To the point of they'll absolutely. They were talking about selling off Crunchyroll. At one point, people found out they're going to sell off Crunchyroll. There are all these big companies are trying to streamline, which I think is actually not a good business plan. They want to go all in on streaming, but that's going to be like Highlander. Like, all these companies are going to be fighting, to be.
Well, they need to look at Netflix and realize just how much debt you have to go in to put out all that content.
Yeah. But I think the day is coming pretty soon. And again, it doesn't mean that there's not going to be Marvel Comics or DC Comics. I just don't know if either. Again, personal opinion, based on what either of these companies want to mess around with publishing comic books, because the profit margins really
or the
there.
hassle of the baggage that goes with it.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, you're talking about freelancers and behaviors. It's like, if you take yourself out of that, like, fine, I just hypothetically speaking, IDW is going to publish all the Marvel superheroes from now on. Marvel Comics is just going to be a bunch of brand managers in New York or California, and we'll just oversee the license. If their freelancers behave badly, that's their problem. It's no longer Disney's problem because they're not Disney employees. They're not Disney contractors. It's like, oh, one of our licensees has a problem with some asshats on Twitter. Well, you deal with it.
Mm-hmm. And that's the model that they like. It's what they want. The challenge, the one block, I think, to that world coming to be, other than just the financial stability of some of these guys, is that both Marvel DC and now AT&T Time Warner, they don't have the confidence yet that the licensee would have their interest at heart. And that's been a stumbling block of making sure that if we're going to do this, that the licensee is going to play ball, the licensee isn't going to start working with multiple companies and create a problem for ourselves, similar to what they got out of with Fox by purchasing that IP. I mean, they're looking for some confidence in the ultimate licensor. They have a lot of control, but like you mentioned, it's kind of arm distance control over what Disney's current licensing companies do. They haven't found that perfect match in comics, and the crazy part is, I don't know if that perfect match really exists out there. But one could be created, but it would take a lot of cash, and there's not cash. So it's very much an interesting kind of thorny problem.
Well, I
do want to bring the conversation back to the Whisper Network, and I think a lot of this is done under the guise that this is out there to protect women, that they had the best interest of women who are vulnerable out there in the industry. But I think if you look at the narrative and a lot of the things that they've done, it doesn't really add up. One of the things we obviously talked about early on in the channel when it happened was we spoke about it just a few minutes ago when Peter Simeti publicly released his social media policy, which was not abnormal. It's something any company would have. He was attacked by all sides, and certainly that Whisper Network had a lot to do with it. A lot of those key members were the ones leading the charge. His social media policy was essentially gender neutral. It had nothing to do with it was not it did not target women, it did not target men. It was just a policy that covered everybody. And the fact that they went after that, you can tell it's not just about women. I think it's absolutely about control of the industry and wanting to push somebody out. And I don't even think it has to do with the fact that Alterna had a policy. I think it's the fact that Alterna and Peter Simeti specifically did not attack and denigrate the fans that they didn't feel were worthy in the industry.
I think you're right on the money, Wes, too. If you revisit the article, I don't know if you're able to share it or anything, but right below the header, key actors, when it starts getting into some of the main vocal people in this secret group, you have this text or this tweet from Alex DeCampi. And Alex DeCampi, it's one of those dark mode texts, so it pops right out. But she says, comics publishers need an independent, dedicated HR person who victims can confidently and safely approach when their freelancers harass colleagues and fans. Well, let's parse that for a minute. So when a freelancer harasses fans, this applies, is what Alex is calling for, this independent person who steps in when a freelancer harasses either a colleague or a fan. There need to be real consequences attached to those reports, but that would involve admitting a problem exists. Now, this is the same person last month is calling for this sort of policing of her colleagues. And yet when Peter Simeti said, hey guys, let's dial back the a-hole attitude towards the fans, you might get in trouble. I might give you a good scolding if you say anything, if you're harassing any fans out there. He's suddenly a Nazi. I don't know. I can't speak to the usefulness of the hashtag that Penny came up with, but there is some hypocrisy here. And if if on the one hand she's calling for this, but everyone's everyone got bent out of shape over the social media policies. This is pure hypocrisy. And I also think that it's about power, just like what you said. It's about gaining control, and power. I don't want to speak out of turn, and I certainly have no offense towards Geeky Sparkles, because I admire her, and actually of all the voices here, I probably like hers, what she has to say the most, because it's unique. But women, I've dated women in my life, and I've got a beautiful, beautiful wife. One or two of you guys are friends with me on Facebook. I'm sure I'm not saying anything that you would disagree with. She's very sweet. She's got a loving heart. But I've dated some evil women out there, narcissistic women out there. And I'm seeing some of those tendencies in this, where it's almost as though you're being gaslit. It's like they don't really care about most of the things they're saying. They're just trying to shift and maneuver things so that they have more power over you. And I'm not quite ready to say that that's my armchair diagnosis as to what's going on here, but I'm starting to lean that way the more I've looked into these folders of screenshots. It's frightening. It's frightening.
So go ahead, Wes.
No.
Okay, I just wanted to jump in here because as we were talking about this, and we're talking about the media, and we're talking about controlling the narrative, and we're talking about women in comics, Geeky has a funny story.
Oh, I do. Yes.
And this goes back to, again, we've only been into this for about 3 years now. Before, this is back when we were not on the blacklist.
This is back when we were doing webcomics more, and we had done stuff for Disney. Well, first of all, I always want to say about women, there are a lot of really great women out there that are very nice. But as a woman, and having friends for years that are women, and being a woman and having kids and being a teacher, I can tell you, girls can be the cattiest, most controlling, mean girl people you've ever seen. But there was an interview that they sent out to several different women, and they were asking them, basically the whole point of the interview was how women are kept down in comics. To which, of the list, I was the only one that had professional credit, and I was the only one whose comic was actually performing. And I answered and said, okay, well, I can see where you could argue this, maybe with the big two. Sometimes there is not as much representation for women as there should be. But when you look at those companies, there have been women in charge. When you look at companies like the graphic novel industry, they're more like for Scholastic and things like that. Women are their best sellers. Women are not being kept down. There's plenty of opportunity. You could argue for one aspect possibly, but not the entire thing. So when the interview came out, I was the only one who wasn't included in the interview, and they put everybody else's comments in there, and they had no credit. They were just, I do my own thing. And all of them were like, oh, women are kept down everywhere. It's so terrible. How dare they? And I was the only one who said that wasn't always the case and cited examples. Only one with actual cred. And I was the one who was not put in the actual printed interview.
They didn't even want a dissenting point of view.
Yeah, well, you talk about journalists and how they support this narrative. I know for a fact, and I agree with Perch, there absolutely are whisper networks out there. In journalism, I can tell you there are gaming journalists and pop culture journalists. A lot of times they're the same people. When there were those anti-Comicsgate pieces written a couple of years ago, it was the same guy going from publication to publication to publication, writing articles to make it look like there was a lot more backlash.
We've seen it with Star Wars. We've seen it with She-Ra. We've seen it with different things.
Yeah.
These PR targeted movements to sway the narrative a certain way.
Yeah, and they know that they get a big megaphone. They go on these platforms, but there is a narrative. They're talking back channel on Slack. You ask look, we ran blog newsrooms. I worked for a newspaper for years. Journalists talk. They do. And when you've got a lot of people working at these outlets, they're only getting paid like $5 or $10 an article. They're getting paid very little. So we were joking on Twitter. I was joking with Aaron Sparrow actually. It's like for the price of a cup of coffee, you can ruin somebody's career,
pretty much. Basically.
But it's a power trip. A lot of these journalists, you look at, they don't have a lot of money. They're not making a lot of money. So what else do they have? Well, I
have power.
I have power.
Right,
it's intoxicating. But yeah, you look at this. Here is an article on a pop culture blog. Not going to say who. They're asking women in comics for their opinions on the comic book industry, the state of the comic book industry, and where women factor into it. And the one dissenting voice is my wife. The only one who actually had any professional credit saying, well, actually, this isn't completely true, and cited a whole bunch of examples of powerful women working in the comic book industry, and they cut her out of the article completely because that's not the story they wanted to tell.
And that goes on a lot on all kinds of websites. I was stunned when I learned that if a person went on comic book resources and said, "Hey, what's this Jawbreakers comic I've heard about?" That person would get banned immediately, not for chilling for Richard, just for asking about it, because it's verboten at that website. You guys, I don't know if you know, but I'm working with Mike Barron and Todd Mulrooney on my first ever crowdfunded comic. We promote crowdfund comics once a week on New Comic Book Day and at Bleeding Fool. And so I figured maybe I might be able to pull off one of my own, or at least the crowdfunding portion of it. And went and made a very, well, you know this already. Clownfish TV already covered this. I don't know, who am I talking to here?
Yeah.
That's okay.
But, just going over there and being associated with Bleeding Fool, because we're Comicsgate all the way. And yes, we've given what I consider fair and balanced, not to steal anything from Fox, but, fair coverage of Comicsgate. And we've had some writers on the website who are anti-Comicsgate, some a little bit too much, they had to go. But some that are pro-Comicsgate, and then me, where I'm just like, hey, I agree people should be hired on merit. I agree that this behavior is bad. I agree that you shouldn't change the gender, race, or sexuality of a legacy character. Create your own new character. Why are we screwing with Green Lantern or whatever, right? But we also celebrate women in comics. We also celebrate minorities in comics. We've got a great article out there about Billy Graham, one of the greatest Black creators in comics. We've done stories about Ann Nesenti, Louise Simonson. There are major people out there, and for us not to be able to talk about what's going on in comics, for them not to want to hear Geeky's opinion in an article, just shows you how shill the media has gotten. And that's what it was also particularly disturbing when you saw Heidi McDonald in this group.
We weren't surprised.
Well, I wasn't surprised.
It was disheartening.
I guess that's it. Yeah. I'm not surprised so much. And also not surprised that Alex DeCampi is fawned over by Rich Johnston. Did you see the hagiographies that he's doing for Alex down near the end, just to show you the incestuous relationship? If you actually go into our Bleeding Fool article, though, down in the comments section, one of our most vocal and frequent comic book reviewers is Robert Willing. He goes by Starredcraft on Twitter. And Robert, he just does really lo-fi reviews. He's got Asperger's. I'm pretty sure that's it. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn. But he loves comics, loves them. And he was like, "Oh, I hope Amy Chu's not, I'm still going to support her. I'm not going to boycott her after all this," which is perfectly fine. We didn't put this article out there to start a boycott. Right. I guess if it had shown up in the Mary Sue, that's precisely what the point of the article would have been. But what I'm trying to say is we allow for dissenting voices. If you don't like Jawbreakers or Cyberfrog, you can write for us. That's not, we don't have these purity tests. But apparently, what's another one that stunned me, a public tweet, was Max Visaggio saying, "Hey folks, hey flying monkeys, the CEO of Dynamite just did a super chat on somebody's YouTube who I can't stand. Go get them. Dynamite is bad." And I'm like, well, are you kidding me? You could probably have still gotten work at Dynamite. They really play both sides of the field. As a matter of fact, Dynamite, is really, I think, trying to appeal to everybody. Yeah. And the guy wants to do a super chat on one of his most prolific creators who bring them a lot of money. Who are you to complain about that, unless you just don't want to work for Dynamite? So some of the behavior isn't as gross and appalling as it just seems ignorant and stupid. I think some of these creators do need a social media policy so they can be reprimanded and say, hey, don't be stupid, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. And I think that's another part of why we're doing it. The whole point of Bleeding Fool was for us to sort of be the like in the royal court, like a Shakespearean King Lear fool that gets to say everything everybody's thinking, but just isn't allowed to say. And that's sort of why Bleeding Fool started. I was shadow banned actually over at Bleeding Cool, their comment section, because I commented, it was another, I don't know if Joe Glass wrote it or Jude Terror or whoever, but Elliot Cole was one of the moderators. And I said it was a diversity article praising the latest diversity comic. And I said, isn't it funny how in the Bronze Age, the biggest comic book team of all time didn't have to say anything about being diverse and inclusive. They just came out with X-Men 94 and they rocked it, and they had cool characters and costumes and great storytelling. And I got shadow banned for that comment. And I thought, are you kidding me? And I got so incensed about it that I said, you know what? If you have to say you're cool, you probably aren't. Clearly. So we're going to call ourselves the Bleeding Fool, just like King Lear, and we're going to thumb our noses at you. And that's sort of been the theme of the website. We do have a lot of writers that just talk about straight news. We have some that like to do a lot of op-eds, and there's some cross-posting. I know that Perch, we've cross-posted some of his stuff. Kneon, we've cross-posted his stuff, especially from TKI. And Wes has written for us and sort of expanded on some of his great videos about the comic industry. But we've got some that just write straight news, and we've got some that have their own opinions. And the only time I've ever said we're not going to publish that was when I had a creator who we've parted ways with that was outright attacking another creator or another independent creator, because there's no point in that. That's just not playing nice and getting along with one another. Because at the end of the day, I want everybody, we can all be reasonable. I've argued with people about whether or not Superman could beat the Hulk, and it's gotten heated. I've also argued with my friends about whether or not that Trump tweet was a good idea. But this is like, if I like a Trump tweet, I should be fired from my job and lose my livelihood. And that's totally uncool. And that's what makes me step back and go, this is grotesque behavior. Somebody stop these people from doing this. This is going to ruin the industry. And if you don't think so, why don't I just show everybody what you're doing and see if you don't at least get your reputation with the few fans you have left, because it is a dwindling audience. You're very...
Okay, Chris, I got to jump in here, man. You woo! There's a lot of good stuff going on there, brother.
Let me mute myself.
I do want to say, if you're new to the channel and you haven't subscribed to Thinking Critical, please consider subscribing to the channel. If you're enjoying the conversation, please give us a thumbs up so people know that we have a great conversation going here. I do want to say thank you very much to Ryan Wilson for the $4.99 super chat. How you stop these secret groups is exposing them, make their info public, and you attack them by exposing all their evil schemes. Now, I am a Christian, and I do believe do unto others as you would like them to do unto you. So I wouldn't want somebody to do that to me, but I do think putting the information out there and letting other people come to a conclusion is probably healthy. But I don't know if just going out and attacking people outright is an answer for anything. But I did want to talk to Geeky Sparkles again. So as a female in the comic book industry, I imagine can you imagine the kind of stress and strain that some of these higher profile female creators put on, like some of the younger creators coming in the industry, and how hard it must be for them to maybe even say no or try and stay away from the group when it feels like maybe they could protect them or probably help them get work in the industry? Do you think that's how they grow their numbers like that?
Well, I'm sure probably in some way they do, because it's the whole idea. If you're not with us, you're against us. And if you want a chance, you're going to follow along. Most people will, because they want to belong and they want the opportunity. Especially the reason I can speak out is because I really don't give a flying F word. I hire me or don't. I don't care. I am busy with other things. So, it's easier for me to say, hey, that's a load of crap, than somebody who really desperately wants to get in. So I'm sure they probably do that. I know they go around, like I was telling you earlier, one time I was talking about the blockchains, and in regards to the fact that my husband, we were talking about him getting blocked for no reason, and this one person misinterpreted what I was saying, and then private messaged me and asked me if I wanted the lists are so great, aren't they? They really helped keep the wrong people off of your feed about what in the list. And I was like, what list? And then immediately like figured out that I wasn't saying what they thought I was saying, and they went away. So yeah, I'm sure they're going around recruiting people with voices that, well, if you really want in, you need to make sure you understand who's really in charge. That wouldn't surprise me at all. It's very mean girl woman-esque way of handling things, honestly.
What's one of the weird things, Kneon, is a lot of the times, one of the things that they're fighting against is grooming. We heard that a lot in the recent round of allegations that we have these people grooming. But when you hear some of these social media tweets and what they're saying, it almost feels like this group within this Whisper network are grooming people to come out with allegations to where, when they finally come out, you're like, that doesn't feel like that's really an allegation. It just feels like you don't like that person, but someone convinced you in your head that something really bad here happened. And not that there wasn't some serious stuff in those allegations, as far as inappropriate conduct and some of it downright illegal. But Kneon, do you think that there's grooming going on with that group to where they're trying to get a group of people ready when it's time to attack the next big creator and things like that?
I don't know if I can speak to that, because I mean we came into the comic book industry as a married couple. We did conventions as a married couple. I mean, I know there's a lot of inappropriate stuff that goes on at conventions, goes on behind the scenes. I know there are certain I mean, look, people come to you, you set up at a convention, you're in the green room, whatever, and people be like, hey, you hear about so-and-so? Yeah, they're a little touchy-feely, don't, but I mean, as far as, anybody grooming anybody else to come out with allegations, I can't speak to that. I don't know. I mean, again, comics being so small, people know, people talk, they're like, hey, did like Scott Ali from Dark Horse, everybody knew for years. He was, he bit people, licked people, whatever, everybody knew this. Just like, don't go near, you want work, cool. Approach Scott at the table during con hours. Do not go to a party with him, and keep it. But we've always, I mean, never really did a lot of parties. We weren't into that scene. And there is there's like a whole nother side to the comic convention scene, like the party side, I think.
Yeah, that's not
the bar con.
Yeah, the bar con.
That's at the anime conventions too. We've done those before, and like different people are accused of whatever. I'm not going to get into that, but I can tell you for a fact that they all act that way because we've been there.
Oh yeah.
But one thing I want to mention too, that they keep saying about this guy did that and that guy did that, but there's a lot of women who do things that are wrong too, and they've canceled themselves or been called out because they did inappropriate things, kissed people inappropriately or did things as well. It's not just a one gender thing, but you only ever really hear about it when it's men. The women, you hear about it for a minute and they bury it really quick.
Yeah, I mean, that is one, there is a double standard. I mean, you look at, I think it was Hope Nicholson from Bedside Press, the Canadian publisher, and her victim came out and said, male came out and said, hey, she kind of groomed me at comic book conventions, at parties, and then, here's my story. And she outed herself and then canceled herself.
I think you don't hear about it either because, I mean, let's be honest here. Women are encouraged to come out, but men, it's like embarrassing and you don't want to talk about it. It's going to be embarrassing for a guy to say, this scarred me so bad I had nightmares for weeks. They're going to be like, well, you're the man. What are you talking about? There's definitely a double standard on being able to report it as well. So, of course, it's going to lean one way over another. It's not saying it's all done on one side and not the other. We know that's not true, but you're not going to hear about it as much when it happens to men because the society standard is you don't say anything because you're the man, you just chalk it up to experience and roll with it. And statistically speaking, men and boys are abused all the time as well, but you don't hear about it. Real quick, I have to go here in a minute too, but I wanted to tell you one more thing. When you're talking about women too, it's interesting, the double standards again. We were on a panel with a woman who is now somebody in the industry. I'm not going to name names again. And this person informed the entire audience how she got her gigs. And she's married, by the way. How she got her gigs was she'd go to the bars with the editors and things, and she'd make sure she'd intercept their drinks so that she was the one leaning in to hand it to them. And she's like, oh, it helps if you wear like, clothes that are more revealing, and you make sure you're the one that so you can get one-on-one time with them and talk to them and promote yourself. And she was talking about going to the bars and basically kind of flirting with the editors to get herself gigs, which worked. But now it's bad. If they're like, why do these guys think that they can just flirt with everybody? Well, maybe I'm not giving them a pass at all, but maybe the standard's been set up that way and it wasn't all their fault. Not that they're what they do is excusable. I'm just saying there might be a reason they think it's okay sometimes. I don't know.
Yeah, it's crazy. I know Perch has told me some stories when he's been to conventions and out at the bar saying it absolutely sounds like it's a frat house.
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. Anime cons are. I mean, it's the whole situation with like Vic Mignogna and stuff like that too. It's like everybody's acting like they're all puritanical now. It's like you have no idea.
You were there when you behaved badly.
You have no idea how you've got kids like at the hotels that are like vomiting from the third floor of the hotel room. You've got voice actors, jumping on each other, licking each other.
The girls in line are unbuttoning their shirts as they're getting closer to the voice actors. And to be like, look at me, hey, and then how dare you come near me as you just shoved your boobs in his face.
It's like we did that scene for years, and we just thought, we're like, well, if he's guilty, then everybody's guilty, because we have seen some stuff, and that's not going to the party. Again, we're not, we're married, we're not partiers, we're hearing people throw up outside of our hotel room, whatever. But just the behavior at the conventions, gets pretty rowdy. It is a frat house, and that's one of the first things I asked people when we started talking about. Inappropriate behavior at conventions is like, have you ever actually been to one like all weekend? Because you're going to see some stuff, it was part of the industry. Now everybody's acting like they're all offended. Now
they were doing the same thing like 2 years ago.
They've been doing this for
10 years. They're going to do the same thing next year. It's nothing that has really fundamentally changed, other than if you are a woman or a man and you're doing some of this kind of crazy behavior in a con, you're true idiot, because you are going, if you get on the wrong side of things, you're going to get busted by people. So behave yourself. I mean, it's a lesson
we
here.
Always do.
Yeah, I mean, we always kind of approached it like, because I worked in corporate marketing and stuff too, so we always approached it like a business.
I'm a teacher, a professional.
Yeah, Geeky's a teacher. She can't be out there looking voice actors or whatever, and people get pictures of that. Just assume everything you do at a convention could possibly be on camera at some point in time. Just assume. That's what I think you have to assume now. I think you have to, in this day and age of social media, with everybody having cell phone camera access to Twitter, whatever, just assume you are on camera. Like going to work and that they've got the camera set up at work. You're not going to steal out of the drawer. Just assume when you go to a convention that everything you do could possibly wind up on social media, and you're going to wind up behaving yourself.
And don't put yourself in a position that you could be in trouble.
That's just it. You mentioned you are at work. A convention is work. You are in the industry. You're at work. So if you wouldn't do this in an office building, and hopefully don't do it there. But I know, Wes, you've got some super chats here. Some really great people in the chat right now.
Yes, I do want to say thank you very much to Mexican Iron Man for the $9.99 super chat. Very generous of you to support the channel. Fantastic show, fantastic guests and topics. First time here. I just liked and will be here for the next show too. Excellent coverage. Well, thank you very much for subscribing and liking the video. And if you're out there and this is your first time, please consider subscribing to the channel. And we are here every Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern for the Comics Aficionados. And obviously we have daily content as well, talking mostly about comic books, but also about pop culture as well. And we do have another super chat that kind of rings in with what we were just talking about. This is from Club Cosplay, the Nerds Nightclub, $5. It's true, the after party scene is the Nerds Music Festival. And that's probably what a big part of the problem is the party scene at these Comic Cons. It sounds like it's quite epic. It sounds like it would make kids in college blush, to be completely honest. And then he also says, thank you so much for the second $5 super chat. We've hosted some of the biggest, wildest parties, and people will be people. And when people party, people get real. Apparently a little too real in the comic book industry, dude. That's one of the nice things about me and married. I went to a Comic-Con, but I brought my kids.
Yeah.
Once
Being
Comic
married
Con was
is great.
over, we went and found an Applebee's and went home.
I've had so many just stories and conversations with people, and it's more of our coming out now. Going, I thought I was the only one. I thought I was the creator who was kind of horrified and concerned that I found myself in a bad situation when I'm in a bar and like some of my colleagues are just getting sloppy and vomiting on things and wrecking my car. I mean, there are people out there, and they should come forward with their stories who have been the poor, mostly sober person driving people back to a hotel from, Old Town in San Diego, and this drunken lunatic is just destroying their property. And these stories are very, very common. And unfortunately, all this stuff that comes out and everything that's been done, I don't see any point to it. And I've been attacked recently. I don't know, it comes in waves, but by both the left and the right for a lot of these comments on this. I think that should be corrected. I don't think nobody has given any plan yet that indicates it's going to be corrected. We'll be here next year. I mean, the only reason why we're not having it this year is there's no conventions.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Very true. So I do want to talk about some of the comments I got on Perch and My's the comic book Whisper Network video that we did. I think I had a nice thumbnail. We were kind of equating it to 1984 with the Whisper Networkers watching you. And we had some interesting comments. Most of these are very pointed, and some of them are somewhat accusatorial towards myself and Perch. So let's get to those. The first one is from, and I'm going to say this wrong because I don't think this is a real world, but I think it's Mikey KR5. And he said, Whisper Network is just a petty power play for control of the smallest, most unstable, and least sustainable entertainment industry in America. And Perch, I think he's got a point here, is that they've kind of salted the land, and they said, this piece of dead earth is ours. We're not going to let you fix it.
I mean, it's a power play. Yeah. I mean, it's in all these things. Networks are an ability to try and give yourself some power. And sometimes that's a good, like we talked about earlier, sometimes that's not a bad thing, to give some people some professional network support and some power. That's not a bad thing. But what people do with that power is a different story. But the people running this one they're not the people who have the established positions in the big companies. So they're looking for some kind of opportunity, some edge up where they can, and they're doing this. This isn't new, and there's been these professional networks all over the place, and some have been more decent than others. But comics has always been pretty goofy.
Yeah, I mean, as I think I referred to it earlier, it's just petty fiefdoms.
Sure. Yeah, and please don't hear me say, and like I've been, a number of people come back and say, "Oh, you sound so casual, like you don't really care." It's like I know I care. It's just when you've seen this go on for like 20 years, and again, no offense to the article or anything else, but shocking revelation that Alex DeCampi and Tess Fowler and some of these people manipulate behind the scenes. Who knew?
Yeah.
And somebody just put the comment, just because it's new doesn't make it right, Perch. I know, I've said that like a dozen times now. It's not right. Nobody is saying because it's not new, it's right. It's not.
It's about trying to figure out we've been dealing with this for 30, 40 years. I mean, in different forms, and there's no real solution to it. That's the problem.
That's right. That's the key, is that it's not, there's no clear solution. It's not an easy solution. And it is, I mean, this is a very tangled mess of things. I think the comment that was made earlier of, we need to talk about it. It's probably the best thing, you need to get this stuff out there, and just try and give some people who are just trying to work in this industry some outlets to do it. But, the idea of groups of people trying to use or pretend that they have more influence than they do in order to enact change they want is common, and it exists in multiple forms in comics today, not just this one. There's many forms, and people won't like it, I'm sure, but there are many different sides here, and none of them are good.
And I'm really happy to see Bleeding Fool do this series of articles. Now, as I said at the time, I think that this is a great appetizer. It needs the subsequent ones need a little bit more meat to them, but it's good. I mean, and it's good to get it out there, because sunlight is the best disinfectant. But the problem we're going to have is this whole situation is just a game of whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
And you can beat this new network down, but it's just going to pop up in different form with different people in a different place.
And that's why people need to be smart about it. And that's why, and I see this reaction from people where they want to get mad. They're like, and this is, we can't talk about this logically. We just need to be mad and frustrated and yell and do some angry videos and everything else. It's got to be smarter than that. We're not going to solve it by just being pissed and raging at stuff or creating a counter network that's going to then attack in the other direction. You have to be logical about this. It's like Doug Ernst does, like other people do. We have to get data out there and do it correctly, or it's, we're just going to be yelling and screaming for no good reason. We see tons of evidence of that all over the country today. So that's not helpful. It does not work.
I think that's a good point too. Doug Ernst, really love Doug. He was one of the first people I noticed, him and Avi Green, that were going after some of the bad behavior online with comic book pros towards fans effectively. And when I first started scratching the surface of that stuff, I guess around 2016, I was stunned. So you're right. There's nothing new here. The article itself is just an appetizer. There's more to come. But I can't tell Penny's story, right? So right now we're looking at the next article dropping around Tuesday. I don't want to set a firm time because the article's not finished, and I'll need to kind of comb through it and make sure that there's no personal attacks or anything like that. I want to try to keep it as much above board as possible. And I will go ahead and say there is no security video of any female comics creator killing another person. There's no shocking video of anything like that. So, slow your roll. And I know you've got some critics of the article right here in this chat, and, they're free to do so. But I think part of that is exactly what Perch is alluding to. This is not a new phenomenon, and this is probably not going to stop this sort of behavior. So that's where I kind of get, that's where I kind of struggle. It's like, well, why are you doing this? I mean, why even bring it up if it's not going to do any good? But I am hoping that it does do some good. You're talking about those conventions. Bad behavior has consequences, and just like people are sometimes afraid to speak up against that bad behavior. It's like, oh, everybody knew the Dark Horse guy was doing this. We just never spoke up. Well, why not just speak up and just let the chips fall where they may and let people be held accountable for their bad behavior? So that's really what this is doing. And it's only not news to people like us who are probably a little bit, cynical, or we've seen it. We've been watching all this stuff while everybody else is reading the next Brian Michael Bendis comic or something, and are completely and ignorantly and blissfully ignorant, I might add, about some of the things that are going on, and we're just trying to point it out.
Well, a lot of people haven't, they pay very minor attention, kind of passing attention to little things here and there. They don't necessarily notice the patterns, and this is putting all the patterns into place because it's necessary. Yeah.
Well, it definitely helps flesh the story out and put it into context about what's going on, because in the wilderness, one or two of these tweets wouldn't really raise the ire of most comic fans. They'd just be like, so she's an a-hole, whatever, right? Because it's creatives, and I've been in the creative industry for a long time. There's very few creatives that don't have massive egos. Very few of them are humble. It doesn't mean I don't love them. Doesn't mean I don't care about their work. I can separate the creator from the creation. I don't need to go back through their internet history. When there's a new comic book out and there's a new creative team, I don't need to go do a Google search of that person's dark web activities to see if I agree with them. I don't care if I agree with them. Is it well written? Is it well drawn? I'm more of an art guy, so if the art sucks, I don't care how well it's written. But this is sort of just peeling back the layers, turning on the light, and the cockroaches scatter. And that's what we're seeing today. It's funny, the aftermath of this article, a few of the major players had a few comments. I had 3 or 4 of the typical white knights that come out and attack us whenever we get a little too close, because most of our articles are pretty tame, or it's old news by the time we publish it, if I'm honest. But there's a few times when I'll get some salty male comic pros who the first thing they want to do is come out and attack us as this is fake news or whatever, right? And I'm not going to name any names. You can go look. But the women, particularly 3 women, came out and either tried to bury the story or poo-poo the story, but with subterfuge, not addressing it by name. And what I think is fascinating, the key, if you'll let me go on for a second, Wes, the key screen grab here is the one where Alex DeCampi is talking about Richard Meyer's Simon & Schuster deal. Okay, to me, if there's one thing to focus on in the entire article, not the teases, not the little appetizers, but the fact that she coordinated and planned to shut down his deal. This is in the private group. This is only between her and the other women in the group. That what she's done here is she has decided that I'm going to talk to my folks at Simon & Schuster and stop this independent creators deal. This to me is evidence of what Mark Waid is accused of doing, right? Now it's not solid evidence. We don't have a recording of the phone call that she made, but at the end of that thread, she even says, I'm going to go do some behind the curtain stuff. And then that's when Penny shows us her association with Bleeding Cool. And as you know, Bleeding Cool is one of those people. They're coming at things from one angle. Each of us comes at things from another angle. I don't think any of us can be totally unbiased and totally even-handed across all spectrums. But to me, this is the one that just kind of shows the vindictive, mean girl behavior. This is the behind-the-scenes look at what's going on, and there's more of it. There's more to come.
Well, absolutely. It's been very enlightening. I do want to say thank you very much to Tarsik for the $2 super chat, because letting it continue is just as evil, talking about these whisper networks being able to operate, with impunity. And we do have another super chat. This one, super chat. This one isn't really talking about the subject, but I will definitely say thank you very much to Kenneth Dowling for the $20 super chat. Very generous. Red Batman 94. No spoilers this time. I'm proud of what Tynion has done with the title. He has made it enjoyable again, particularly the dark design storyline. At first, I had no interest in Joke War. Now bring it on. And I agree with you. Definitely, if you haven't seen the review on the channel, check it out. I had a good time doing that one with Nalo, and we're also going to be reviewing Deceased Dead Planet this Sunday on the channel. And I'm definitely ready for Joker War as well. Like I said, once again, thank you very much to Kenneth Dowling for supporting the channel. Now, I do want to get to something. Well, this definitely goes with what Chris was talking about. And this is something that I get a lot. Whenever I bring up a topic or I have a point of view that is specifically that someone doesn't like, this is what I get. I'm amused CG goons have only discovered the age-old tradition of whisper networks. Something born, I think it's got to be born, like B-O-R-N, of necessity in our sexist society long before anyone taking now about it was. That was from Sal Good Sam. And this is the straw man kind of thing. This is the video that Perch and I did had nothing to do with Comicsgate, because this Whisper Network is specifically about pro-creators who aren't Comicsgate. They're probably anti-Comicsgate, I'll give them that. But this is the way people justify the behavior. Is it's not this Whisper Network's the problem. You still have Comicsgate out there. As long as Comicsgate is there, that this Whisper Network, where they're attacking other pros who aren't part of Comicsgate, is necessary. And Kneon, I'm sure you get it on your channel probably even harder than I do. But it's this like boogeyman that they just want to put out there, that Comicsgate is there. Everything is necessary.
Oh God, you would be shocked at the number of wacky emails we get, death threats. We get those pretty much all the time, and everybody's like crying about any pushback at all on Twitter. I'm like, yeah, try running a YouTube channel and talking about this stuff, and we get it not just from comic book people, but because we also worked on the animation side of things. we get from the animation people, which I'm gonna be honest, that's a whole other issue, and it's actually worse than comics. Yeah, we get it all over the place. Look, the way I view this whole thing is comics is a small industry, and it's a dysfunctional family, and dysfunctional families hate outsiders coming in and pointing out their problems.
Yeah,
and that's what's going on here. We've got, it is kind of weird because we watched the Comicsgate situation, we watched the YouTube situation kind of at arm's length for a while until we got dragged into it. Again, I never ever set out to talk about this kind of stuff. It just happened because just even peering back the curtain a little bit got me put on the banned list, the naughty list. Mm-hmm. And that's after working in the industry for like 15 years. Mm-hmm. Like I had no idea any of this stuff was going on. I, at that point, had pretty much walked away from comics because the money wasn't there. And it is a weird industry. I mean, it's a weird ass industry. It really is. And it's dysfunctional. You have a lot of dysfunctional people. I think it attracts dysfunctional people. That's not everybody, but there are a lot of, and I'm not being sarcastic about it. I mean, there are a lot of truly broken people working in the comic book industry because they don't really have any place else to go. Yeah. And comics is a weird, just even the way the economics of the industry works, it's freelance, it's gig to gig, it's very transient. Your jobs are very transient. And again, this isn't to throw shade at anybody, but I think some of the people working in comics can't work in any other industry where you have to punch a clock 9 to 5. So they kind of, gravitate toward the comic book industry. And so you get a lot of people like that maybe have baggage from other places, and they're all congregating in an industry that's sort of shrinking compared to other entertainment art forms, and the resources are being eaten up, and they see this outside threat come in. These other people being like, "Hey, we're making money and you're not." Boom. Yeah, they're gonna get salty. Yeah. Because they're seeing what little scrap I guess they have being taken away, from outsiders. And again, it does remind me of a dysfunctional family. They do, you walk into a family and you take a look around, you're like, God, you're all just a bunch of alcoholics, aren't you? Well, we're gonna fix that. They don't want to hear it. So that, yeah, it's, and I think comics is not used to being challenged either, because it is so, kind of tight knit and small, and it's been kind of, under the radar for so long. They're not used to having these outsiders come in, because even the journalists support the industry. I guess you could say the journalists were enablers, instigators, and YouTube has thrown a huge wrench into things, because you do have a lot of people that don't play ball. They don't have to play ball, and they're not used to that. They're not used to being challenged, and you're just seeing. I think you're seeing a lot of knee-jerk reactions, and some of the people. I mean, this is what surprises me too. I know some of these people personally, and in person, they're not that bad. Mm-hmm. But social media turns the filter comes off. Like, I can say whatever I want to. I'm behind the keyboard, whatever. But these people in real life would not say the same thing to your face. Precisely. So it's sad. It's just it really is. I mean, could I get angry about it? We already made up our minds that like the comic book industry is not worth it, for us. So we already walked away. But it is sad because we're just watching it just kind of implode. Watching people have meltdowns. And
one of the things that I find interesting, and I do understand that as pros and even as insiders and whatnot, people that's seen this for so long, but then you've got the consumers out there and the people that are kind of coming into contact with this for the first time. They're just comic lovers. They're just comic readers. And they get enraged because they're not familiar with it. Yeah. And they're not familiar with the injustice that goes along with a lot of the backstabbing and whatnot, and how really diabolical some of the people are in the comics industry. Yeah. So they get enraged over it. I mean, I see it at the shop all the time. They're like, "Oh, did you see what so and so said about Doug Ernst?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I've seen that for about 5 years now." And they're like, "Well, I'm not familiar with it, and I think we should do something about it." Mm-hmm. So you see that perpetuated continuously because the people that are fresh to it, they have fresh outrage.
Yeah.
And
they should though.
Yep, and they should, and they absolutely should.
Be talked about, yeah. And I try to, we get hate mail too. We get and we get it actually from places, people who you would think would sort of like what we're serving at the restaurant, but because we serve this one dessert over here, we got to boycott that restaurant because they're serving something that we don't like there. I'm amused by this post by Sal Good Sam that somehow what Alex DeCampi is doing here is necessary because of our sexist society or something. Yeah. It's almost as though, is that an Alex DeCampi sock puppet account? I'm not sure what we're looking at here, but you know, there are people who comment in our Twitter all the time when we post this kind of stuff. On the one hand, they're shocked, just like you were just saying, but on the other hand, we've got those that are like, poo on that. That's not what you say it is. And either go ahead.
I would expect better of Alex DeCampi if it is him, because the Born is Borne in that context, and that's just awful. Okay. There's no excuse for that. No, I'm just kidding. But
don't misgender Alex DeCampi, by the way.
Oh, whatever.
She's, you know.
I apologize then.
I don't want him to pull that out of context.
But I just went by the picture. I just went by the photograph.
Careful.
Sorry. But mea culpa on that one, I guess.
Okay. I just think that, you know, the CG goons, that's the other thing. I've got people in CG that have boycotted Bleeding Fool because we let one writer write for us that did not like CG, and particularly didn't like the WC clown show that it was. And then we have people on the other side that we haven't been sufficiently pro CG enough, right? So you've got the people who are hardcore CG, and what CG is represented for them, it's some of these outspoken creators, some of which do certainly monetize on outrage clicks and so on. And then you have the other people on the other side of it who it's like, no, CG is no longer, these people are so unfriendly to people like Doug Ernst and John Della Rose that, you know, I can't support CG at all anymore. And to me, yeah, I still align with sort of the original purpose of CG, which was born out of, first of all, what Captain Frugal was doing, what Doug Ernst was doing, what Avi Green was doing, that was sort of showing the bad behavior. And then the incident where a couple of low-level pros had been caught in a private Facebook group conspiring to try to get Richard Meyer to make an ass of himself at a convention and get him kicked out. And it was John Della Rose that had the clip that showed this happening, a video clip of the Facebook page. And that blew up, and that was Comicsgate. And of course, Richard was definitely not the perfect ambassador for a consumer movement, because Richard was just a salty old pissed off curmudgeon about the comics industry and how he wanted a career in it and he wasn't getting it, and he started pointing out all the sham behavior too. And none of us are perfect mouthpieces or ambassador for this movement. We're just trying to say, hey, this is newsworthy. It's like I caught flack last weekend for mentioning that Ethan Van Sciver's Cyberfrog 2 campaign had crossed $1 million. I thought, this, you know, say what you like about Ethan, that's notable. Whether you like it or not, that's a notable thing. Yes, but just the fact that we printed it meant that we're really in Ethan's pocket, that he pays us for coverage. And I thought that's so ludicrous, because CBR won't even talk about Ethan. And if Bleeding Cool does it, they're always, you know, sticking a knife in somehow.
Yeah.
And what I thought, my article was just really straight up coverage of here's what happened. Let's compare these numbers here. Let's put it in perspective. Kudos to Ethan for your accomplishment. Let's go crowdfunding, folks. That seems to be a model that we could all get behind. But no, the people who were maybe formerly fans of Bleeding Fool hated us for it.
Yeah, you definitely get that on YouTube. I know Perch and I have discussed it. Is like in the same video, I'll be called an alt-right, but I'll also be called a comic industry shill. Like
Yeah.
I guess it just depends on your perspective when you're listening to it. So I do want to say thank you very much to All About the Books for the $10 super chat. Bat Shinobi Sasquatch on Indiegogo. The Rob Willis art is amazing. And Rob Willis is an amazing artist. So
yes,
there you go. All About the Books definitely wants you to go check out that book. And thank you very much for supporting the channel. It's very generous of you.
I mean, we're in a weird era where even just recognizing objective facts means that somehow you are supportive of that message, whatever that message is. Like, walking outside and saying the sky is blue, or walking outside and saying, it's raining. Oh, you like it when it's raining? No, I just said it's raining. Come on. We're in this weird era where you can't even just state facts. If you state facts, you must agree with those facts.
Yeah, maybe I'm just in an odd area of the country, but majority of my customers are pro OG Comicsgate. They're pro the message that was initially launched with Comicsgate, and so they consider themselves Comicsgate, and I'm fine with that. We had a sign up for a while that says Comicsgate safe space in the shop, and I took
you
it
had
down.
A safe space.
Yeah,
I'm just busting your balls. Dude.
I know. It was just funny. Yeah, it was just something fun, and eventually it got taken down because somebody got so incensed over it. That they just had a fit. They had a complete meltdown, so it got taken down. But anyway, but yeah, I support that aspect of the movement, and what it morphed into, I don't support. So, if we want to talk about what the initial goals and the initial ideas of what it was, then yeah, I'm behind that 100%. But and I think that's what the majority of the people that are the customers out there, that's their heart. That's where their heart is. That's where they are, and I'm going to follow the customers. I'm going to follow my customers because, I know them to be good people, and we're a community here at the shop, and that's what we do. So
I do want to say thank you very much to Dark Admiral March Hare for the $4.99 super chat. Very generous of you to support the channel. Just wanted to say thank you to Wes and the panel for the thoughtful discussion and news. Even when I disagree with your opinions, I can respect them. Thank you very much, and I absolutely respect your opinions. And thank you to everyone in the comments section. Everyone is being very civil. Lots of good conversations in there. A couple of people getting salty, but that's obviously normal. I've seen much worse in other streams, and I'm always very grateful that at the audience that we have and how friendly you are to each other and to the panel guests. So thank you very much for that. And like I said earlier, if this is your first time on Thinking Critical, please consider subscribing to the channel. If you're enjoying the conversation, please give the video a thumbs up and let people know that we're having a great conversation right here, right now. And I do want to move on to another topic that came up in my comments for the video Perch and I did. And this one's kind of aimed at Perch, so I guess I'll send this one over to you. This is what Fritzy Schnitzel says. Perch says we need a new approach. What is it? Perch always seems to take a cynical, nothing will work attitude when discussing problems within the comic book business or the comic business. Are you the Eeyore of Thinking Critical and comic?
I'm hearing in the chat I'm too happy and casual about things. I'm also hearing I'm too cynical. I don't know. What work is easy in a lot of cases. What works are some standards and some enforcement of those standards. Other businesses have tackled these problems. Just like this isn't new, the solutions aren't new. Many companies have problems with hiring and shenanigans that go on within companies all the time. And the solution is you have some oversight. You do not have a third-party independent HR group. That's absurd. That sounds like it's Alex DeCampi trying to make a job for herself, frankly. Inside these companies, and the crazy part is, many of these companies have these units. I mean, Disney has a unit. AT&T, Time Warner has a group that is specifically designed to remove nepotism, try to keep a lot of this kind of harassment. I mean, tech conferences like CES and other things that Disney and AT&T and Time Warner all go to have policies where you don't you don't get into kind of sexual shenanigans. You don't do things that are going to violate the handbook. All these rules established. So the simple approach is just follow the rules that are down on paper and stop treating this like some crazy Wild West environment. Stop using the excuse that if these are independent contractors that you really can't control them, or the other excuse that because it's a creative industry that we need to just let these people run wild, or they will not be able to have creative work. None of this is that hard. It just takes some willpower to enforce what you have. And when you start enforcing it, yeah, a lot of these people are going to be pissed, and they're going to be running Twitter campaigns, and they're going to be saying, how dare this company come after me? They're coming after me because I'm voted for this person, or I'm a woman, or that, or whatever it happens to be. There are easy solutions, honestly, but it takes willpower to do it. And it does mean you're going to take some hits when you start enforcing it, but it needs to be enforced. There are good people in comics. They're getting drowned out by this bullshit. I'm sorry. And yes, I do need my tequila.
More Patron, people.
More Patron.
Patron. One of the questions in the chat was, how do we get these corporations to enforce those rules? And honestly, unless you get hired,
you need corporate oversight. Right now, both companies feel like they're kind of operating independent.
Yeah, but I mean, unless you get hired to do that job, you can't make somebody else do their job.
Well, there is no plan. There's no plan to fix this. I think just shining a light on it. I'm a lot like Perch. I'm kind of a curmudgeon. Historically, things aren't going to change. And so I get the sentimentality about the way comics used to be. Maybe it was because we just didn't know as much because it was pre-social media days. But I also want to address the anti-CG. I no longer like the new CG or what it's become or whatever. And there's some people. I'm more traditional CG. Obviously, OG CG is how I came into this. And there are some players in the new CG, if you will. But I almost hate to do that. I kind of hate the whole CG label. But it is a movement, and it's based around consumers. Yes, there are some people who have run with CG, either creating, trademarking the name or monetizing it in some fashion. But then there are others who are still preaching to the same choir about CG because the problem's still here. What I mean is it may have morphed into some things, and there may be some bad actors in it, but the issues are still prevalent. And that's what Penny's article is all about. Honestly, it wasn't really to sort of re-litigate whether or not CG is a real thing or worthy of our time or consideration, but it's really just sort of, hey, the problem's still here. And I totally appreciate Perch being kind of pessimistic or cynical about it, because it's like, how long must we continue to try to spend our time thinking of how to fix this? We can't fix this. But I think hopefully talking about it, shining a light on it, will make them, heal themselves a little bit. I mean, I can only hope. I don't know what else we can do, guys.
Well, please, when people are accusing me of being too happy and cheerful dolls, remember this pessimistic comment. Just
I talk to Perch behind the scenes all the time. He's really salty. He's saltier than in Pele. He just hides it well on camera.
I am pretty salty. I think that's the big thing that people don't understand is that, I'm trying to go for this logically because I want, everybody should make up their own opinions and have their own ideas about things. But absolutely, I have my own. I mean, it's just I hate it when I go to channels or go to other places, people are shoving their opinions into me. I don't want that. I don't think you want it either. So you have your own opinion, and I'll try and lay out facts the best I can. But absolutely, I'm pissed about a lot of this stuff.
After he takes his frustrations out on me, then he gives you guys the cold hard facts. That's our relationship.
Yeah,
people.
that's what it is. Yeah.
I think that as long as people, the only thing that's going to change anything is cutting off the money supply.
Yeah.
And as long as you keep supporting creators that perpetually, I'm not talking about people that have one-off situations. I'm not talking about people that have different politics. I'm talking about serial abusers. As long as people keep supporting the serial abusers in the industry, then we're going to continue to have the problems. And there's some creators now, I won't even carry their books. I mean, I just will not carry it. I don't care if a customer wants it. I'll say, I'm sorry, I can't carry that particular book. And I don't get that. I don't get people asking for Mags of Saggio books. I don't get people asking for certain other creators' books. And I won't carry them in my shop anyway because they are serial abusers. They are destructive to the industry, and I just won't. I won't do it anymore. So as people just have to put their foot down and say, that's it. This is the line. We're not going to cross it anymore. And again, I'm not talking about somebody that just has a different political view. I'm not talking about somebody that has a different gender, whatever, anything. I don't care. I don't care about any of that. I'm talking about the serial abusers. That has to stop, and we have to start being conscientious consumers as far as they're concerned.
Thank you very much for that. So I do want to say thank you very much to Clip Elor for the $9.99 super chat. I shouldn't have to say this, but Wes and Perch are the most fair and thought-provoking in this space, in my opinion. Different views ain't going to kill anyone. Well, thank you very much, Cliff. We really appreciate the support. Perch and I do try to give a different perspective, a different spin on everything that we're saying, and let people come up with their kind of their own opinions. And I do want to say welcome to the channel, Tristan from Nerdette's Newsstand, the first lady of comic books, in here with us today, and it's always great to have her here. And we got another one in here. I'm missing it. Oh, here we go. This is also from Cliff Elor. Thank you so much for the $9.99 super chat. Very generous of you. As a leftist myself, I appreciate different views because it sharpens my mind. I don't know when we started to go so get so soft to embrace it. That is probably the biggest issue here, and I think you'll probably agree with this too, Kneon, is the lack of discourse and civility in discourse. Everybody just wants to point fingers rather than hear a point of view and maybe understand where the other person's coming from. Just because we have a discussion doesn't mean we have to come to a meeting where we agree on anything, right? But we can understand what people are talking about.
Yeah, I maybe I'm just getting old, but I miss when people could agree to disagree. I miss when you didn't know who your coworker voted for because they weren't broadcasting it. I miss when we could all agree on the basics, and then maybe the other stuff is kind of open for debate or whatever. But everything has become so volatile and so political, and it's not surprising that it's creeping into pop culture because that's where the country is right now.
I miss my wife being able to wear a red hat at the farmer's market without getting produce thrown at her. I mean, it just said the red hat that said Arbor Day Society on it.
Yeah.
And because it was like in a font that was similar in size, somebody's like throwing like produce at her, and it's like, oh, I thought it was one of those MAGA hats. Well, it wouldn't matter if it is. Right. That's assault.
Yeah.
Grow up.
Yeah. Right. Grow up.
I saw one they were selling. It was a red hat. It said "Made You Look" or something like that. It was, but I mean, they're throwing people out of restaurants and everything for this, and it's so weird because again, we, my wife and I, we identify as left-leaning moderates. We thought we were kind of normies. We thought we were middle of the road, and what shocked me is like how quickly everything became so hyper politicized, and we kind of saw it on the back end in comics. Like it's really started about 2013, 2014, and I think a lot of it was when Hollywood started getting involved, when mainstream publishing like New York started getting involved with the graphic novel scene and all of that. We went through that whole thing, and they brought some of that sensibility, I think, to comics, where comics wasn't like middle America working on comics anymore. It never really was. I mean, let's be honest, comics were produced mostly in New York and California, but a lot of the really, really, really far left politics are, the New York publishing scene, Hollywood, and then they started getting intermingled with comics, with gaming. Now they're kind of coming for anime too. And when you get that in there, they're bringing the sensibilities with them. Kind of, again, this is my opinion, what we've seen, but it seems like they're sort of remaking quote unquote problematic industries into their own liking, so it's more palatable for what they think their audience is, and and I said before, I think the worst thing in some ways that happened to comic books as an industry, as an art form, was when Hollywood got involved, because that's when people stopped making comics just to make comics and started making comics as pitches for movies and TV shows and all of that. But yeah, I miss just being able to sit down and be like, hey, I don't agree with you about this or that or whatever, but we can still work together. We can still go have fun together. We can still game together. We can go to a comic shop and talk comics, and it doesn't have to be. Now everything has political connotations. Everything, and
everything's a statement.
It is. Yeah. It's tiresome. I think people are getting tired of it, and they really want to just kind of roll back 10, 15 years, not being like, well, let's go back to the Stone Age when it was all white men doing everything. No, that's not what they're talking about. I think they're talking about, like, let's just roll it back to when, you know, entertainment could be an escape from everything that's going on in the world, especially now. 2020 sucks. You know, I think everybody can agree on that. 2020 sucks. Do you really want to wallow in that when you go pick up a comic book or go play a video game or watch a movie? It's like, no, you want to get away from it, you know?
One of the things
you
that's
want
interesting.
a comic book with that stamp that says this is a 2020 pandemic shutdown collectible.
Let's be reminded of that, right?
Back the comeback. Back the comeback. Anyway,
I can't.
I do want to say thank you very much to Ryan Wilson for the $4.99 super chat. Thank you for supporting the channel. I don't care if comics are political. I don't either. I think a lot of comics should have social commentary. Yeah. I care that they push narratives and ideas that are actually true and factual. It's when they start getting preachy and they become propaganda, and the idea, it's no longer a story. It's a message, you know, disguised as a story. That's when you start losing me as a reader. So thank you very much to Ryan Wilson for the support. Also, thank you to Dark Admiral March Hare for the $4.99 super chat. We all know Doc is the power behind the throne. I got my eye on you, sir. Honestly, wish I had a tenth of his X-Men knowledge. We all do. Doc is the connoisseur of X-Men here on the channel. He's also got quite the X-Men collection. You're almost got 1 through 300, right?
I have almost completed 1 through 600.
Whoa, I was way off.
Yeah.
I'll take that.
hot dog.
Including all variants and reprints.
Good God.
We were talking about the as far as, you know, the political aspect of this, the shift of the Overton window in the last 4 years. I don't know if anybody else watches Tim Pool, but he had an amazing graphic up there, and he talked about it, that the right in this country has shifted 3 degrees to the right in the last 10 years, and they're showing the Overton window slightly move. The left moved 57 degrees in 10 years.
That sounds about right.
That was since 2012, actually, so it's 8 years. So, and you've got to where it shifted to, okay, this is where Democrats were, which is in the middle, and now Democrats are over here to the other side of the European leftists, the European socialists. And it's like, wow, and while everybody else in the United States stayed where they were, you know, and it's really shocking. That's what the culture shock is, and normalizing that huge 50, you know, plus degree shift is what everybody's feeling, and it's just it's too much, and it's too much of a swing, and it really just stuns people.
I do want to say thank you to Club Cosplay Booking for the $2 super chat. What did you think of X-Force? I haven't read it yet. Doc, have you read X-Force number 10?
No, it's still sitting in my pile. I have not read any comics.
You read it, didn't you?
I read it, yeah. No, I mean,
all right, what did you think of it? Was it good? Is it the plant people again?
Yeah, no, the X-Men are fighting too many plants. Like the villains can't all be plants. There's too many plant villains.
I agree.
Is it Empire doing plants too?
Yeah, Empire's Aquati. There's plants everywhere. I think that it's an okay issue. I like the Percy. I like a lot of those things, but there's 3 things I wish the X-Men would like put a moratorium on. 1, like plant villains. Seriously, like enough is enough. 2, the Beast doing shenanigans behind the scenes and dubious things, and then people finding out about him being pissed at him. I mean, like, come on, we've run that into the ground at this point. Just kill him or have him do something else, or just do something else with the Beast. And then I don't. There's a spoiler at the end, so I guess I don't want to say anything. But you know, I think the last 2 pages, I think are meant to be like, ooh, this is something tantalizing and cool. And for me, it's like I kind of like the Beast again. Like I feel exhausted just reading it. So I don't know. Some people in the chat may want to go into it, but I won't spoil it for you. But I was a big tease of you get some horny stuff at the end, and it's like, I mean, okay, sure.
Nice. So I need to read that one fast, but I've been sick, and I'm trying to keep up with comics, so I haven't been able to read it myself. Thank you very much for supporting the channel. And this is the last comment that I do want to talk about that I got on the video that Perch and I did. This is from Definitely Not Batman. What I don't understand is why their employers aren't doing anything about this mess. why is this being tolerated? And I think the word employers has a big part to do with it, don't you, Perch? Is that they're not really their employers.
No, it's twofold. It's one, they're independent contractors, and the problem is when you set precedent and you start you take action against an independent contractor for some of this, then you open up the door for other people to come in and sue you if you're not doing it consistently. And the problem is this is so widespread in the industry that if you start, you have to keep going. And I think nobody in the industry, both because there's just not enough money in it, there's not enough tolerance in it. A lot of the people at the high level of the company participate in this activity, and it's their friends, so they want to go into it. And it's like nobody wants to get the ball rolling because they know once it starts, they have to clean house. They have to go all through it, and that would impact 30 to 40% of the people in the company, and that's just things they don't want to deal with. And again, on top of all this, you've got staff jobs. Now, I'm not talking about the independent contractors, but the true employees, the editors, the others, who are making like $40,000 a year living in Manhattan. That's not enough money to survive, and it's not enough money for anybody to really get excited about fixing this thing. And so, unless the comic companies want to do something completely radical, like that's the budget they have, they're going to have to start hiring people in Kansas and other places to staff these jobs. They're not going to do that. So it's like it's locked in place where it's very difficult for this to start to be unwound. And that's maybe where people are hearing me, this sense of futility in my voice. It will happen. The sad part, and maybe the very cynical thing, is it's going to kick off with truly something terrible. Like something really, really terrible is going to occur that will force this to kind of kick into motion. Changes will happen. I just am sad that it's going to have to get to a terrible place.
Yeah, but at the same time, if the Eric Esquivel thing or the what the hell was his name with the editor
Eddie
Berganza, if that doesn't do it, what do you need them to like actually be like murdering people or something? I mean, what's gonna
happen too?
You have to go further back. We have seen. I mean, the Max Brooks situation. We Mark Brooks. What I'm saying, we have seen murder. We've seen it's got to be big. It's going to be big. It's got to be very embarrassing. And unfortunately it hasn't hit that yet. And I think that's the part that is frustrating with me in the industry. I talked to some other editors and some other people. I mean, everybody actually believes that a moment is coming of some truly terrible, heinous crime that gets national attention that forces these people to act is coming.
And like a Chris Benoit situation?
Yeah, like a Chris Benoit situation, or like just a very, very nasty sexual assault that gets national news. I feel it's coming, and a lot of people just feel it's like a train wreck that they can't stop, and that's a terrible thing.
I think it's going to be a very ugly situation that's going to erupt sometime at a convention after all the COVID, everything's over with. That people, somebody's going to like pick up a samurai sword. One of these crazy woke people is going to like get a samurai sword and chop some CGer's head off or something at a convention. Considering the way how nutty this has gone, that's what I'm afraid is going to happen. And it's almost reached that point as far as pushing and shoving and whatnot. It won't take much more than one of these crazy people to just snap. And
hopefully I don't see anyone cutting anyone's head off.
We'll have a Highlander situation right in the middle of
I hope none of this comes to
Baltimore Comic-Con.
Yeah, none of this to happen. But it feels like there's the train is out of control. The brakes aren't on, and we're just going to hit it at some point. I do not want it to happen, and that's why you hear a very big sadness in my voice, and why it's hard to fix these things, because we do not want this to occur, but it feels inevitable.
Yeah,
so Kneon, we're going to go on off topic here. Your wife is in the comments saying that you've spoken about doing like a YouTuber Comic-Con.
Oh, geez, we were kind of joking about it. We did one before. We did one like, my God.
Yeah, but you were big time, really important YouTubers. Then you were only kind of important YouTubers.
We're not. We're very small. But
I look up to you guys. Don't say
that. Oh God,
that.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
But real quick, just before you start, I do have to say this. When you did a story that featured the Florida Man book, I have neighbors that said, "You're internet famous. Clownfish TV is talking about you." You guys You're a bigger deal than you think. That's all I'm going to say about it.
You're a needle mover, sir.
It's weird. We just like work out of the corner of our hat. Like I said, we never intended to get into this stuff. And this is the whole thing with, Comicsgate too is, I saw some people saying in the chat that it's not a title you give yourself. It's a title that other people give you. And at one point, 3 years ago, if you spoke out about the comic book industry at all or said, hey, there are some problems here, that was enough to get you labeled Comicsgate or Comicsgate friendly. That was enough to get you banned. That was enough to get you booted out of the industry. That was enough to get, all these concerned emails and everything like, how very dare you? And, it's just weird how everything is blown up. But yeah, I don't really consider us big. We just kind of fell into it. I don't know. We talked about doing an online convention. We did one before and we did webcomics and we couldn't handle it back then. It was like 10 years ago and everybody made fun of us. They're like, you can't do comic conventions online. I'm like, now everybody's doing it online.
I'm telling you right now, if you want to book Thinking Critical and Comics by Perch, we will be there, sir.
Speaking of Tim Pool earlier, he is looking for someone to handle culture, geek culture, stuff like that, and to comic books and the like. You might want to get in touch with him because he has like that huge bankroll from when he did that fundraising about a year ago, and he's ready to fund some people to really jump forward with
He's
that.
got a big audience too, Tim.
Well,
got a great voice.
Well, I agree with him. I mean, he's kind of in the same place where we're at, where we, again, until the last couple of years, like we always considered ourselves progressive. We always considered ourselves, leftist, but we're talking, Clinton era, Obama era left, and that, talking about moving the needle. The needle's moved so far where now we're like, if you're not an outright socialist, you're not one of them, and it almost feels like it's everybody else against people pushing for America to become a socialist country, and that's, to me, that's not America. We can argue over the minutia of day-to-day laws or whatever, include all that, but at the end of it, America to me is still supposed to be the land of opportunity. It's supposed to be a capitalist country. We can argue about how to get give more people more opportunities, but really you're supposed to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That's the American story. Viva la capitalism, and but that's a horrible thing to say now. If you even show support for capitalism on Twitter, they will run you off. I'm like, what country do you think you're living in? I mean, this is crazy. I don't know how we went from zero to crazy so fast. But yeah, I do like Tim Pool because I completely sympathize with him because I feel like I'm in the same place.
Yeah,
I just think it's a good opportunity for somebody, maybe like a husband and wife duo, to really get into that because, like I said, he has pockets. So, and this is not like charity type stuff. He's looking to actually pay somebody to provide real good quality geek content.
Maybe we should
all publicly
coordinate. Let's all publicly coordinate and start tweeting back to Tim.
Let's get a whisper network together.
Clownfish. Yeah,
we
can start
recording Tim.
Let's call it a network.
Well, you've got an extensive catalog that he can look at too. So it's
I appreciate the vote of confidence, but I don't know. I mean, like I said, we all of this is accidental for us. We just kind of went with it, and it's so weird because Chris was mentioning that the Kingdom Insider. Well, I used to run that blog. We're actually in a lawsuit right now with my former partner. I got booted out of that blog. And she took our names off of all of our articles, years of work, and locked us out of the website. And then she tried to come after our current Disney site's name. It's a mess, but we're so that's how we started doing YouTube more often. Was like I literally got paid to write about, visit theme parks for years. I had the rug pulled out from underneath me. Part of me wonders if it isn't, partially at least because of the stuff that we were talking about that maybe Disney didn't like. I don't know. But then we kind of fell into YouTube. It was like, thank God we had it as a backup, to replace that income. But we never set out to be YouTubers. That was not what
the channel's just exploded. Kudos to you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
So we do have one final comment, and hopefully everyone will have some input for this one. Dark Admiral March Herring did a $9.99 super chat. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Could you do a segment sometime where the panel could suggest some reading outside the big two, possibly manga, indie? I'm kind of burned out sorting through the garbage. Okay, so I got some suggestions for you. If you like sci-fi, go out there and you need to find Blade Runner 2019. What is it? The Kill Lock from IDW. That one's great. There's some good horror stuff out there with the Plot over at Vault Comics. There's some other. I think it's Black Stars Above out there is really good.
Spawn.
Spawn came down for me, but Spawn was absolutely.
But it's still the best perennial comic book as far as as far as indie
perennial.
Okay. Because it's 320 some odd issues. That's
Haley, I haven't gotten to you yet. You can say Spawn when it's your turn. Haley, what would you suggest?
Cancel him.
Spawn. Well, actually, yes, Spawn. But there's some really amazing stuff out there by Boom Studios right now, and also
Something's Killing the Children is great.
Ooh, man, there's some powerful stuff. Great horror out there. But look through Boom Studios catalog. Look through, people are kind of down on Alterna, but I love Alterna and I love Peter Simiti. I know there's still people have issues. I don't care. I like Peter Simiti. So look at their stuff. It's priced great. It's really something to sit back and enjoy several issues. On a rainy day or something. But those are my suggestions. Just look at the whole of Boom, what Boom is putting out right now. Scout's making some really great comics right now, and look into Alterna's back catalog too.
Speaking of catalog, go to the back catalog. I mean, there's good stuff back there.
Yep.
All right. Yule Carter's saying read Copra from Image. I haven't read that one. Kneon, do you have any suggestions for manga or some comics off the beaten path that people should be looking at?
Well, manga. I've been reading more manga than anything else at this point. In fact, we've been talking to some folks from Viz, and they're just killing it. They're killing it. Demon Slayer is amazing. Such a good series. And I guess the manga wrapped up, but we were watching the anime too, and 60 million copies of Demon Slayer have been sold. Okay, you can't even calculate. And I wanted to say too, I agree 100% with Peter Simiti. What he's doing, it's awesome, because when I was a kid, when I got into comics, when I was reading Marvel, I could buy pretty much every major Marvel book for the price of mowing a lawn. I could go, $10, I could go buy all my X-Men, Spider-Man books, and maybe a Captain America, and it was great. And that's really what it's going to take to get younger readers in. I love that Peter is keeping the price point to a sane level. I mean, say what you want about newsprint, but I think most of us here, given our ages, probably started reading comics on newsprint. It was fine back then. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, Demon Slayer is absolutely amazing, and I'm just really excited about manga right now, and we're seeing the graphic novel sales. I know ICV2 did the chart, and they're talking about how graphic novel sales are increasing, and I think a lot of that is manga. Like our kids, I mean, they have access to tons of comics. They don't read comic books. They'll read manga. They'll read scholastic stuff. That's what the kids are reading today. But yeah, Geeky's saying Demon Slayer. It's a really, really good. 60 million copies of that manga. Okay, so it's got to be doing something right.
Oh, one thing, somebody mentioned Invincible. That latest omnibus is amazing. I mean, the latest omnibus that they put out.
All right, Haley, we're wrapping it up. You already had your
Shut up. You already had your turn.
Saying it. Chris,
that's all I was going to add. That's all I was going to add.
Does Bleeding Fool have anything to put out there for people to be reading off the beaten path?
I don't always like to make recommendations. I'll show you some things I'm reading. I'm on board with the Blade Runner from Titan.
Absolutely.
I occasionally pick this up too.
That's good.
I really enjoyed this series. There's a 7-issue series. It's being solicited this month as a trade. It's a pretty good deal, actually. So you guys that own comic shops, you might want to push it. Let me tell you, the comic I'm most excited about is what Ablaze has been doing. Is anybody aware of these Conan Uncensored called the Sumerian? Man,
a little different.
Yeah, they are. It's not the same American comic sensibility that you're used to, but I like it. I'm a big fan of Conan, and I was glad that Marvel got it back, because I got a bunch of sweet omnibuses out of it, still getting those. But I mean, I still like the old stuff. I mean, I'm just one of these people that there's plenty out there. If you're not happy with what's coming out currently, or you're not happy with certain creators, then may I recommend guys like P. Craig Russell or Ross Andrew or John Buscema and some of the guys who I'm thankful there was no Twitter back then, because I don't have to peel it, look into their minds, I can just read the stories. And so, there's a lot of good stuff out there, and manga is exploding right now. I suggest you check it out. I'm one of these people. I only dip my toe in manga, so I've got like Lost Stars, the Star Wars books that just came out, and Viz just did a Luke Skywalker one too. I like Star Wars. Ryan Johnson tried as hard as he could to make me not like it, but I still do some of it. So those are my recommendations right now. Just check it out, sample some stuff, ask your local comic shop owner what they might think is a good recommendation for you, because they're going to know better than anybody. And I definitely suggest you comb through the backside of previews. There's a book called Grit coming out. There's a couple of great books coming out that look great. So just dip your toe, see what you like, and support it and shout about it if you find something you like. I love celebrating new stuff. I don't like pointing out this ugly stuff that goes on, but I feel it's just kind of necessary sometimes.
Absolutely. So, Doc, what are you suggesting that's off the big two? I know you're mostly a Marvel guy and DC guy. What else?
I am, but outside of them, Invincible. Absolutely, go buy all 12 or whatever it is volumes of the hardcovers, or 24-ish trades, whatever the hell format it's in at this point. Every issue is amazing. So go try Invincible. Scene of the Crime, Kill or Be Killed, Fatale, Velvet, pretty much anything that Ed Brubaker does. A lot of his Image stuff, really, really well done. He did a couple of books for Vertigo before he kind of went over to Wildstorm and started getting big in order to get poached by Marvel, because in the early 2000s, that's what they were doing. They were just poaching Wildstorm talent. Planetary as well. It was by Warren Ellis and John Cassaday. It's 27 issues. Amazing love letter to 20th century fiction. And you know what? A slightly older one. I know I've recommended it in the past, but you could probably find all the individual issues really, really cheap at this point. Battle Chasers by Joe Mad. Yeah.
Boom. All right. Thank you all for joining us. Now, Perch, you're going to take us out, man. What do you recommend?
Well, I mean, everybody has different tastes. So I think the best thing you can do for yourself, if you're trying to stick around finding something new, is go to some of these big anthology sites, or whether it's digital or print. Certainly talking to your shop is a good idea, but just go and try and cast a really wide net. And so, I mean, even stuff like Webtoons, if you go there, there's just a ton of content. It will help you determine what you like. And then from there, you can go deep into a lot of these properties. Same thing with Shonen Jump. If you're interested in manga, there's the Shonen Jump app is just tailor-made for you. There's a ton of stuff there. I mean, there's hundreds of titles you can get for free, where you can see these comics. You can kind of hone in on what you like, and then from there go deep. I mean, there's a ridiculous amount of content. And the great part is, if you haven't gone into manga or some of these indies right now, I mean, if you go into things like Naruto or One Piece, you've got thousands of I mean, you will be busy for the next 5 years with content. You will keep yourself entertained, and you can do it at probably the lowest price point I think that I've ever seen at this point. So that's definitely what I do. Otherwise, I shouldn't leave it out. I think Sean Gordon Murphy's little crowdfunded project is wrapping up here, I think, in the next couple of days. It is for $10 for the digital, 20 something for the soft copy. It's for 160 plus pages. That premise, I've seen some material on it. I hate to be kind of show mode, but it's a really good premise. You will like it.
Are you running that campaign?
I am not. I have not.
He is. What's your cut, Perch?
I get no cut. I get no money off this, but I will tell you the premise is going to surprise some people. It's a really good premise, and the quality is looking really good.
All right. Well, with that, I guess that will wrap up today's live stream. I want to thank everybody. Obviously, Geeky Sparkles was here earlier. She had a cutout. She's been in the comments section, keeping things lively. Kneon from Clownfish TV, thank you for being here. Chris from Bleeding Fool, thank you for coming on here talking about the article. A lot of information. It sounds like more is coming, correct?
I hope so. Lord willing, it's scheduled for Tuesday, so let's see how it goes.
All right, we'll be watching out for Tuesday. We might have some more stuff to talk about here on the channel, and obviously, Perch, Pele, Doc, thank you all so much for joining us. We got to get out of here. We went long, people. Salamat po. We're out.
Let's show ass.